also to be outside the universe. Not only you feel yourself to be outside your body, you can sometimes often see your body also outside, but you feel you are in a outside the universe. That's a transcendent, okay, experience. Then the other experience is you can see the divine in the cosmos. You may see him, his presence rather, the impersonal presence, you will see him in the universe. In trees, in stones, in everywhere you will see his presence is there. This is what is normally called pantheism. Or if you are following the bhakti path, you will see the divine in yourself. You will feel his presence. So these are the three main methods of how you can see the divine. Okay. Now, this chapter is a long one and a very important one. Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara, Maya, Prakriti, Shakti. So, Brahman consciousness is the impersonal consciousness of the divine. You feel yourself to be absolutely in an infinite existence. Okay, it's normally it happens when you are in the self. Okay? It's the nirvana of the Buddhism. It is also the Atman and the Brahman consciousness of the Advaita philosophy. No features at all. You can't describe what the consciousness is, but you are in an infinite consciousness. It's a sea of calm, quiet peace and immutability. Absolutely no movement at all. But it's absolutely real. Okay. This is the Brahman consciousness. As soon as you make your mind silent, it goes into the Brahman consciousness. But when you rise slightly higher and you go to the Purusha consciousness, the Purusha consciousness is you start seeing the personal aspect. It takes a form. Okay. The Brahman consciousness is formless, impersonal, infinite. But the Purusha consciousness is something which slightly starts taking a form and you can feel. He is there, you can feel this presence in the spiritual planes of consciousness also. But this Purusha is separated from Shakti. Okay? He doesn't have any power. He's totally separate from the universe. Okay? He is a Purusha consciousness. Then when you go to the highest level, the Ishvara consciousness, it is personal and impersonal. You see the divine, but he also shows himself as impersonal. He has got both personal and impersonal, and therefore there is ananda and love, but there is also power in the Ishvara consciousness. So the three stages are clear. Brahman consciousness is impersonal, immutable, infinite, calm, peace, no knowledge, nothing, no emotion, nothing at all. Okay, this is the Brahman consciousness. Then the next is the Purusha consciousness. You start seeing some sort of personality, okay, at various levels. There's a Purusha of the mind, there's a Purusha of the vital, there's a Purusha even at the physical. Okay, you see there's sense of a personality, but there is no power there, and you feel yourself to be separate. Okay? In the Brahman consciousness also you are separate. But in the Brahman consciousness, I'll come to that. The Brahman consciousness, the world doesn't even exist for you. In the Purusha consciousness, the world exists, but it is separate from you. When you go to the Ishvara consciousness, the world is not separated from you, and you have everything that you want. That's usually the supramental standard. Okay, you go there and you see the divine as well as the impersonal divine, the personal divine as well as the personal divine, and he has got power in the physical world. He is ruling his kingdom. Okay, he has power. So these are the three stages which you experience. Depending on which sadhak has gone to which level, he makes his own philosophy. Okay. Now we come to the other aspect, the Maya. Shilpa asked a question about Maya. Maya in this context is illusion. When you are in the Brahman consciousness, you see the physical world as illusion. There is no reality at all. It is just like a picture. A picture is not real. It's only a representation. So that is what you see the physical world is. It is something without a relief. It's only lines and drawings. You feel that there is no substance in it. Okay, that is the Maya. I'll come to the other meanings afterward, but first in this context, Brahman corresponds to Maya. When you are in Brahman consciousness, impersonal and infinite and immutable, you see the physical world as unreal. This is Maya. When you go to the Purusha consciousness slightly above, or it depends, it need not be above also. When you go to the next level of the Purusha consciousness, you see that that is the reality, but the physical world is now Prakriti. In other words, it is not unreal, but it is mechanical, unconscious. You see the river flowing, there's no consciousness. You see the wind flowing, no consciousness, but there is power in it. Okay, the Shakti, the element. Okay, then you see all creatures also moving, but they seem to be unconscious, mechanical, like machines. Okay, there is a Purusha Prakriti correspondence. Then when you go to the highest level of the Ishvara consciousness, this energy which seemed to be mechanical and without consciousness now becomes your own power. It is the power, it is Shakti of the divine. There is consciousness in it, there is power in it. Okay, there is a correspondence to the three levels. Is it clear? If it is clear, we'll proceed with the reading. But if it is not clear, you can ask questions and we will discuss it a little further. Okay, three levels. Brahman consciousness, as I said just now, impersonal, immutable, infinite, eternal. And the world is unreal. This is the Mayavada philosophy. It's also the Buddhistic philosophy. Okay. Then you go to the Purusha consciousness. This is the Sankhya philosophy, and all the others also, many Advaita philosophy also says the same. You can experience the divine as the Purusha. But if you realize the divine as Purusha, the world is not unreal, but it is mechanical and unconscious. You go to the third level, Ishvara. He is like a king. He has all the power. He is fully conscious of what he has created. He is ruling his own kingdom. Okay? At that time, the world is created by you. You have the power. Clear? Okay. Then Shilpa asked a question about Maya. So now I'll explain to you Maya. Maya normally means at the highest level, it's the power of the divine to create. Maya. Ma, the root ma in Sanskrit means to give form to. Okay, measure. Okay. In our Indian language also we have the word mapa. Okay. It measures. When you measure something, you are limiting it. And when you limit it, it becomes manifest. Okay. It takes a form. All manifestation needs forms. If it is formless, then you can't say that it is manifested. It remains unmanifest. Okay, like a large amount of clay, it contains the possibility of making pots and pans, but it is unmanifested. So when you take a small amount of clay and make it a pot, now it is manifested. The pot and the pan is now you can see the pan. So this is the Maya, the power to create forms. But when you are at the lowest level, when you are at the highest level, Maya is the power to create forms. When you come down to the next level of the Purusha consciousness, these forms are unreal. They don't seem to have any substance. It's like the photographs of things, okay? Like the images of things. No reality. Okay? But only it is force. There is there are only forms. Then when you come down to the last level, those forms also now are illusions. So Maya has got three meanings. The first meaning is the power to create forms. That is experienced at the highest level. When you are in the Purusha consciousness, Maya is the power to create, okay? And in the last level, it is creating illusions. So depending at which level you are, you see Prakriti in a different way. Prakriti can become the power to create. Prakriti can become the power to create forms, and it can also become illusion, depending at each level. At the highest level, perfect reality. At the second level, semi-reality. At the last level, at the experience of the Brahman, when you make your mind silent, the world is unreal. So this is the whole chapter. Okay. So shall we start reading?
Yes.
Okay.
Shall
So,
I?
pardon?
No, shall I read?
Oh, yes, 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 you can.
Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara, Maya, Prakriti, Shakti. It is there in being indivisible and as if divided. Gita. Brahman, the truth, the knowledge, the infinite. Taittiriya Upanishad. Know Purusha and Prakriti to be both eternal without beginning. Gita. One must know Maya as Prakriti and the master of Maya as the great Lord of all. Shvetashvatara Upanishad. It is might of the Godhead in the world that turns the wheel of Brahman. Him one must know, the supreme Lord of all lords, the supreme Godhead above all Godheads. Supreme too is his Shakti and manifold the nature working of her knowledge and her force. One Godhead occurred in all beings, the inner self of all beings, all the all pervading absolute without qualities, the overseer of all actions, the witness, the knower. Chetasvatra Upanishad.
Shweta Ashvatara, Shweta Ashwat, the white horse, Shweta Ashvatara Upanishad. Now, the Upanishads experience all these planes, but there is no codification and there is no proper analysis, which Sri Aurobindo gives. In this chapter, Sri Aurobindo is giving the analysis and what you experience at what level. Okay, the levels are very important, but in the Upanishads, depends on who is experiencing what. So, all the experiences are given, but there is no gradation, there is no pell-mell. It's all the experiences are given in the Upanishads. It's not codified, but in Sri Aurobindo philosophy, he codifies, systematizes, analyzes, and gives all the different planes of consciousness. Okay, so now we start reading this paragraph. There is then.
Okay. Shall I read or Archana Di or Sumki Di will read?
Archana can't read because she is in the hospital. So
Okay.
you have to.
I will. Okay, I will read.
Yeah.
There is then a supreme reality, eternal, absolute, and infinite. Because it is absolute and infinite, it is in its essence indeterminable. It is indefinable and inconceivable by finite and defining mind. It is ineffable by a mind-created speech. It is describable neither by our negations, neti, for we cannot limit it by saying it is not this, it is not that, nor by our affirmations, for we cannot fix it by saying it is this, it is that, iti. And yet, though in this way unknowable to us, it is not altogether and in every way unknowable. It is self-evident to itself, and although inexpressible, yet self-evident to a knowledge, by identity of which the spiritual being in us must be capable. For that spiritual being is in its essence and its original and intimate reality not other than this supreme existence.
Very clearly, it's summarizing what we have said in the previous para. Okay, so the previous the previous chapter, okay, indeterminates and cosmic determinations and the indeterminable. So he is summarizing what he said earlier. There is a supreme reality which is indeterminable. What does it mean, indeterminable? You cannot ascribe any features to it. When you use the word determinate, that means it is very clearly, it has got features and you can describe it. Okay, I have my computer, I can describe it. I may not be able to describe it fully, but I can describe it. Okay, it has got features. But the divine, there is no features and it is infinite and eternal and beyond words. That's why it is ineffable. Ineffable means I can't describe it in any way. Okay? So this is the reality. And that which is the divine, which is absolutely indeterminable, it is eternally indeterminable. That means the mind can never ascribe qualities to it. You can't say it is this much weight, this much color, this much form. You can't say, because it is all forms, all colors, everything in essence. So you can't describe the divine at all. That's a indeterminable. Forever, you can never describe. But as he starts manifesting himself, he becomes more and more determinate. In other words, he starts putting on qualities. That's why the Nirguna Brahman. Nirguna means without qualities. But as it keeps coming down, it becomes Saguna Brahman. Okay? The transcendent is the Nirguna Brahman. The Saguna Brahman is the Brahman with qualities. You can see him in the universe, you can see him in yourself, you can see the divine presence everywhere. The qualities. So he is summarizing what he has said earlier. I'll do one thing. I'll read out the summary of what he's saying here, a very short one, and then we will look at each sentence. What he's saying here. There is a supreme reality. You can use the word God if you want, or you can use any other word you want. There is a supreme reality which is indeterminable, infinite, eternal, unknowable to mind, because it is indefinable. You can't define it. It cannot be defined by positives. You can't say it is this, it is that, okay? It is this, it is of this color, it's of this form. You can't say that, because the opposite also is true. It is this, it is that, nor can it be defined by negatives. It is not this, it is not this, it is not this, neti, neti. Beyond all description. But it is not absolutely beyond our knowledge, because it can be known by an intimate identity. The mind may not be able to realize it, but there is a consciousness above the mind, and with that consciousness, you can identify yourself with this reality, because it is no other than our own soul, our own spirit. It's like you are one drop of water, a small drop of water, and you can merge into the sea. So now you know the sea. Okay? That's what he's saying. Identity with the divine. Then the human soul is nothing but a portion of the divine supreme existence. That is the reason why you can identify yourself with the divine. This is a philosophy which is not very acceptable to the many other religions, okay? Particularly Christianity and Islam, you can never become the divine. In the Advaita philosophy in India, all the philosophies, they say, of course you can become the divine, because essentially you are divine. Your soul is divine. But you have covered yourself up with many, many heavy layers, okay? Your body, matter, your vital, the prana, and your mind. So you have to get rid of all these coverings, and you will discover that you are essentially the divine. That also, there are two stages. You are the individual divine, and you can also become the universal divine. Okay? What he's saying is very small paragraph. Summarize what he said in 40 pages, he's summarizing in one paragraph. I'm reading the paragraph now. There is then a supreme reality, eternal, absolute, and infinite. Because it is absolute and infinite, it is in its essence indeterminable. You can never prescribe or describe it with features. It is indefinable and inconceivable by finite and defining mind. The mind is always defining. It is always giving characteristics, it is analyzing. It is giving characteristics. Only when you describe something in the mind, by the mind, you know what it is. But without that, you can't. So, but the divine cannot be described in any way. It is indefinable and inconceivable by finite and defining mind. It is ineffable by a mind-created speech. Note that, a speech. Okay. It is indescribable neither by our negations, neti neti, or we cannot limit it by saying it is not this, it is not that, nor by our affirmations. It is this, it is this. Or we cannot fix it by saying it is this, it is that. Iti, iti. And yet, though in this way unknowable to us, it is not altogether and in every way unknowable. It is self-evident to itself. And although inexpressible, yet self-evident to a knowledge by identity of which the spiritual being in us must be capable. So they're saying, when the experience is there, obviously it means that your spiritual being in you, the psychic being, can become the divine. For that spiritual being is in its essence and original and intimate reality, not other than the supreme existence. So here also there are two categories. You are essentially the infinite divine. That's the Advaita philosophy. Then there is the other philosophy which says that you know you are the divine, but you can also have a relation with the divine. Okay, that's the uh, Vishishta Advaita, special Advaita, where you can become the divine, but you can also have a relation with the divine. Individual soul can also exist. So this is what he said in the paragraph. Now we go to the next one. What is the time?
Yet we have.
Yeah. So we can read one more para. But although this
Shall I-
indeterminate.
Shall I read? Or
Yes, do that. Yeah, do that.
Okay. But although thus indeterminable to mind because of its absoluteness and infinity, we discover that this supreme and eternal infinite determines itself to our consciousness in the universe by real and fundamental truths of its being which are beyond the universe and in it and are the very foundation of its existence. These truths present themselves to our conceptual cognition as the fundamental aspect in which we see and experience the omnipresent reality. In themselves, they are seized directly, not by intellectual understanding, but by spiritual intuition, a spiritual experience in the very substance of our consciousness. But they can also be caught at in conception by a large and a plastic idea and can be expressed in some sort by a plastic speech which does not insist too much on rigid definition or limit the wideness and subtlety of the idea. In order to express this experience or this idea with any nearness, a language has to be created which is at once intuitively metaphysical and revealingly poetic, admitting significant and living images as the vehicle of a close, suggestive, and vivid indication. A language such as we find hammered out into subtle and pregnant massiveness in the Veda and the Upanishads. In the ordinary tongue of metaphysical thought, we have to be content with a distant indication and approximation by abstractions, which may still be of some service to our intellect. For it is this kind of speech which suits our methods of logical and rational understanding. But if it is to be of real service, the intellect must consent to pass out the bounds of infinite logic and accustom itself to the logic of the infinite. On this condition alone, by this way of seeing and thinking, it ceases to be paradoxical or futile to speak of the ineffable. But if we insist on applying a finite logic to the infinite, the omnipresent reality will escape us and we shall grasp instead of an abstract shadow, a dead form of petrified into speech, or a hard, incisive graph which speaks of the reality but does not express it. Our way of knowing must be appropriate to that which is to be known. Otherwise, we achieve only a distant speculation, a figure of knowledge, and not veritable knowledge.
Yeah. Okay. So what he's saying is by the mind it is not knowable, but your consciousness can know it. The consciousness is not the mind. The consciousness can be mental, it can be spiritual, it can be vital, it can even be physical. Okay. That's a very interesting thing that you must note. Okay. The body also has a consciousness. We don't think of it that way. Okay. But the consciousness can be physical. It can be also zero in the inconscient. The consciousness can contract itself and become zero in the inconscient. Slowly, in life forms, in bodies, there is a consciousness in the body. I'll give you examples. Then there is a consciousness in the vital, There's a mental consciousness, and since we experience only mental consciousness, we think that consciousness is mental. It is not. There can be a spiritual consciousness which is outside the mind, and there can be a consciousness which includes everything, and that's a divine. There's a gradation. The highest consciousness, and it becomes less, and becomes the absolutely zero in the inconscient. Now, just these are very interesting hints that I'm giving you. The body consciousness, okay, we can have several facts which show that the body is conscious. Okay, number one, when there is a wound, the body knows that the blood is oozing out and it is dangerous. You lose blood. It immediately repairs itself. It clots. It creates clots and repairs the damage. Now, the mind is not doing that. The vital is not doing that. The body is which is doing. So it has a consciousness. Okay. Now, when you swallow some food and sometimes it goes into your windpipe, it happens to be all the time. Okay. Then I'm not doing anything. The breath in the lungs throws itself out violently. I don't want this food to come into the lungs. It's wrong. I want air to go into the lungs. So it violently throws it out. You start coughing loudly. Okay. So that's also body consciousness. Okay. Then the other experience also, the blood is being poisoned by the things which are rejecting in the blood. So what it does, it goes and purifies the blood through the kidneys. Now, this is not a mental thing. It's a body which is doing it. And the body says, each cell of my body needs food. So what does it do? It starts pumping blood through the heart and sends food and air and oxygen to every cell in the body. Is this not consciousness? It is absolutely consciousness. Okay? So, there's a consciousness in the body, there's a consciousness in the vital, there's a consciousness in the mind, but the mind consciousness can never know the divine. But the consciousness which is above the mind can know the divine by becoming the divine. That's what he's saying. So, with this thing, I'm reading out to show, with words can we describe the divine? You can to a certain extent if your language is suitable. That's what he's saying. So, I'm reading out the summary, and then if we have the time, we'll go through each sentence. I'm reading out the summary. Although unknowable to our limited and fragmented mind, the mind is analytical. Remember, it is never synthetic. Okay? It always analyzes to understand things. Fragmented mind. It can be known by identity. The mind cannot know it, by identity can. It can be experienced by spiritual intuition, which is beyond mind. Though ineffable, that means cannot be described in words, though ineffable, it can be represented to the mind in symbols, images. But the language used cannot be rigid, logical, mentalized. It cannot be. It has to be plastic, flexible, poetic language, which uses the logic of the infinite. A language similar to the Vedas or the Upanishads. Okay? This is basically what he's saying in the para. You can use a language, but it has to be very, very plastic. It has to have suggestions. Like poetry has suggestions, okay? But you can't use very clear words which have only one meaning, okay? In poetry, always these words are full of suggestions, okay? Vibrations we send out and give many, many suggestions, okay? Just like, I give one very easy example to follow, okay? When you say a house, okay, it means very clearly that structure, physical structure in which you live. But if you use the word home, okay, many, many suggestions start coming in, okay? It is a structure in which you live, but it's also a structure which gives you protection and safety and sense of security. So when you use the word home, it gives you a different idea. They are different. So this is the type of language that you have to use, Chandra is saying, for understanding the divine. Okay. So So I'll now read each sentence. We have time, so we'll just go through this para. Okay, you got about 7-8 minutes. But although thus indeterminable to mind, I'm reading the first sentence of the second para. But although thus indeterminable to mind, because of its absoluteness and infinity, we discovered that the supreme and eternal infinite determines itself to our consciousness in the universe by real and fundamental truths of its being, which are beyond the universe and in it, and are the very foundation of its existence. So which are these fundamental truths? Sat, Chit, Shakti, Ananda. And Sat becomes matter, something which you can understand, okay? But Chit Shakti becomes the vital prana in the physical world, okay? And Ananda becomes a psychic being, and Superman becomes the mind. So the highest, the fundamental truths are becoming, representing itself through physical forms in the universe. That's what he's saying, which are itself to our consciousness in the universe by real and fundamental truths of its beings, which are beyond the universe and in it, and are the very foundation of the existence. All our existence here, the physical existence, is based on Satchitananda. These truths present themselves to our conceptual cognition. He is using the word conceptual cognition, mental knowledge, that which conceives of things. Cognition, the capacity to think and to understand, to cognize, to recognize forms and understand. So conceptual cognition, mental knowledge, as the fundamental aspects in which we see and experience the omnipresent reality. Omnipresent reality is there everywhere, but you have to understand it by the mind. That's what he's saying. In which you see and experience the omnipresent reality. In themselves, the forms that you see in the physical world, in themselves, they are seized directly, not by, okay, in themselves means Satchidananda. He's talking of the Satchidananda. In themselves, not as in the physical world. In themselves, they are seized directly, not by intellectual understanding, but by spiritual intuition. When the intuition is there and enters into you, you realize what the supreme reality is. A spiritual experience in the very substance of our consciousness. This consciousness can be mental, it can also be intuitive, it can also be over mental, and it can also be supermental. The same consciousness in you can purify itself and become all these higher states. That's what he's saying. In themselves, they are seized directly, not by intellectual understanding, but by spiritual intuition, a spiritual experience in the very substance of our consciousness. Many have experienced this intuition. All the great discoveries are usually by intuition, whether it be scientific truths also, or even spiritual truths. Okay? Even the scientific truths, okay? You discover the laws of physics, like Newton discovered the law of gravitation. He recognized it. Okay. Then what about in the body? Okay. Circulation was also discovered at one time. I've forgotten the name of the circulation of blood in the body. That was discovered. So all these are by intuition. Suddenly you get an idea that, oh, it must be like this. So intuition is there, not at all uncomfortable. Newton, Einstein, I'm talking only of the physical world, but all spiritual knowledge is usually by intuition. Okay? But they can also be caught at in conception by large and plastic idea, and can be expressed in some sort by plastic speech, which does not insist too much on rigid definition or limit the wideness and subtlety of the idea. Now, this is very interesting because some languages, they are very, very precise. French is supposed to be extremely precise. English is not supposed to be that precise. It has got many connotations. One word can have different vibrations. That's why English as well as Sanskrit is very good for poetry, because in poetry you are throwing out suggestions and giving all sorts of ideas and vibrations which the word contains in itself. But in French, It's very, very precise. That's the reason why all international legal treaties are normally written in French because it's very, very clear. Okay. Otherwise, there can be loopholes and the treaty will not have much validity. Okay. So anyway, so in order to express this experience or this idea with any nearness, a language has been created which becomes intuitively magical and revealingly poetic. There you are, poetry. Okay, poetry has always got the words, these are suggestions. And you know, you have heard of the 5-line poetry in Japanese, now it's called a haiku. Okay, just several words, but they send out hints. Okay, the haiku is full of words which are vibrating with hidden meanings. So that's a type of revealingly poetic. Okay, admitting significant and living images as the vehicle of the vehicle. Each thing that you see in the physical world is carrying the truth. It's a vehicle of a close, suggestive, and vivid indication. A language such as we find hammered out into a subtle and pregnant massiveness in the Veda. Look at the words. It is subtle, but it is pregnant with massiveness. It may be subtle, but it is full of suggestions of the Veda and the Upanishads. In the ordinary tongue of metaphysical thought, we have to be content with a distant indication, an approximation by abstractions, which may still be of some service to our intellect, for it is this kind of speech which suits our method of logical and rational understanding. But if it is to be of real service, the intellect must consent to pass out of the bounds of a finite logic and accustom itself to the logic of the infinite. One example of logic of the infinite, I'll give you. Okay, the one and the many are different in finite logic. In the infinite logic, they are different aspects of the same thing. Okay, black and white are opposites in finite logic, and it is better that they remain opposite. Cruel and kind are finite logic, they are different. But in the logic of the infinite, they are different aspects of the same thing. You have to accustom yourself to these ideas. On this condition alone, and by this way of seeing and thinking, it ceases to be paradoxical or futile to speak of the ineffable. But if we insist on applying a finite logic to the infinite, the omnipresent will keep us, and we shall grasp instead an abstract shadow, a dead form, petrified into speech. Petrified, made into a stone. Okay, a dead form, petrified into speech, or a hard, incisive graph. Incisive, incisive is one. That's incision is a cutting. Okay, so, which spreads. Which speaks of the reality but does not express it. Our way of knowing must be appropriate to that which is to be known. If you want to know, you have to use the right instrument. Okay? If you want to know physical truths, you use your mind. If you want to know spiritual truths, you can't use your mind. You have to use your intuition. Okay? Just like if you want to know subatomic particles, you have to use a microscope. And if you want to know what is there in the largest stars in the universe, you can't use a microscope, nor your knowledge, nor your sight. You have to use a telescope. So depending on what you want to know, your instrument of knowledge also must differ. That's what it's saying. Otherwise, we achieve only a distant speculation, okay? A figure of knowledge and not the veritable knowledge. Okay? We stop here today. Next time we'll take up supreme truth aspect. I lost my internet connection. That's why I spoke to you on the phone. So can I bid everybody au revoir?
Thank you, Rangada.
Okay.